Hope everybody is doing well. It's another lovely day here in Durham, North Carolina. We've actually got some chilly weather, which we don't always have, and all along those lines, but definitely it is some chilly weather here in Durham, North Carolina, and that is definitely something that we were not having a few days ago because it was actually a on the little bit on the warmer side, but now it's been in the cool side. But hey, that's what you expect in winter and everything. So I'm going to play a PSA about mental health, and then I'll be right back with some more conversation as well as an amazing guest. So hold on one second, and we're going to do that right now.
I just need to be left alone right now, man.
No, Cam. I think the problem is that you've been left alone way too much.
Life's hard. The world is complicated.
Remember, you are not alone.
Love you, girl. I love you too.
Mental health challenges are common, treatable, and often preventable.
It's time to talk about it.
It's time to defy the fear and stigma that has made so many suffer in silence.
Instead, dare to love yourself and others.
Dare to ask for help and support.
I love you guys.
Dare to listen and show up for the people around you.
Join the conversation.
As I was saying, things are going well here. Folks are definitely enjoying the sunny weather, even though it is a little bit on the chilly side. And I know that right here at the Cultural Arts Center that I work at, the Hayti Heritage Center, a number of people were here in the midnight hour, but yours truly was not one of them because around February of every year, and they've been doing this for a number of years, they do a poetry slam that is dedicated toward the whole notion of a romance and eroticism and all along those lines. But those folks stay here from like about midnight because I don't even think the doors open till 11:30 till like 2 or 3 o'clock. And I have done that in the past, but this particular year I decided I would go home and just relax, watch a little bit of TV, and get some rest time because rest time is a very important thing and all along those lines. So we definitely did have the young people running around earlier in the day as there is a regular camp here that is going on, our youth camp. So they were learning about musical theater and they were learning about dance and they were learning about even how to learn your own family history and all along those lines. Because there's a gentleman from Raleigh that talks about family history and the importance of learning that and definitely having that as part of your repertoire. We know that too often people don't know their family history. I'm glad that I knew three of my four grandparents. One of them died at a very young age, so I never really got a chance to know them, but I did know three of the four and actually had a long and wonderful relationship with them. I was sad when they passed. One of them having passed back in the early 80s. It was one of my mentors, a young lady, Molly Houston Lee, that was a librarian and all in that space. So she definitely inspired me to be part of the creative person and media person that I am even to this particular day. And there were others that inspired me as well that have gone on and are part of that legacy of being the ancestors. And there are definitely some ancestors, including some that were associated with this center, that I still feel have a resonance in my own life and my own existence and all in that way. Because definitely a lot of people will remember Baba Chuck Davis, who was a well known African dancer. And we've actually got a marionette that is somewhat in his honor that is upstairs. I guess that's what that would be described as it's a marionette-like figure and everything. And then, of course, there is a mural of him as well because he was definitely a pioneer here in this area and was definitely dedicated to teaching people about African dance and definitely having a very peaceful kind of um, way around themselves because definitely that was one of the ways he would end his performances was saying love, peace, and respect for everyone. That was almost like his mantra and everything. It was a very powerful mantra in that sense. So definitely that's something that's going on, and a lot of people will remember that as well. But I've got an amazing guest and looking forward to hear what they've got to say about some of the things that they went through in their life. As you know, one of the things that I pride myself on is that I am 62 years old and I'm still learning things because definitely, and I think that my dad, who is a wonderful artist, and he is now 82. I think he'll be, sorry, mom is about to be Mom turned 82 in, see, if I'm about to turn 62 in July, mom will turn 82 in May, which means dad is around 84 or something like that. We're currently 83. But all three of them, or both of them, I should say, are lifelong learners. And I consider myself a lifelong learner. I've been learning ever since I was a teenager and even remember some of those lessons learned and all in that space. But I'm continuing to learn, and that's something that I see that Ashmita prides herself on as well, being a lifelong learner, even though she did have to deal with grief at a very young age. So I'm gonna bring Ashmita in, and we're gonna learn a lot about her as well. So hope that everything is going well. How are you doing, Ashmita? Hope that I pronounced the name correctly and all along those lines. But yeah, I've always prided myself on being a lifelong learner, and sometimes it is a tragedy that causes us to get those life lessons and everything. And it seems like you had to deal with some tragedy even at a very young age in your 20s and all in that space. But like I said, I know that I've had some grief periods, whether I was in my current age, because I definitely lost a uncle not that long ago, and all in that space, and a aunt, actually his wife, that was not that maybe a year or two before he passed, and all in that space. And of course, there are a number of friends that have passed, including some that passed many, many years ago. I remember one that passed when he was actually dealing with just enjoying some time out at a pond. And I think that he had some sort of attack. It might have been asthma or something like that, but unfortunately perished in a drowning, even though he's part of a circle of friends of that we all hung out together and all in that space. So it was after I left that group or wasn't as attached that I heard about his passing and everything. But yeah, a lot of times these grief moments do happen unexpectedly.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hi, Mark.
Hey, how are you doing?
I am doing fine, thank you.
No problem. Glad to meet you and glad to learn more about you and everything. So, definitely, when I heard about the book, I was going like, "What's your story?" What a great title for a book, because we all have stories to tell, and sometimes I know that that's one of the things I've talked about with some of my other guests is that there's this notion that we all have a book in us and that we all have something that we could write down, whether that's in a journal or in a life book, whether that's a novel or a short story. And it sounds to me like that's pretty much what the title of the book implies, that we all have a story. Because when I read that title, I'm like, that's a good question. What is your story? Because everybody has a story and all in that space. So if you'll share a little bit with the audience how you even came up with that title.
Yes, exactly. So, what's your story? Yes. The title of the book, I titled the book that gave the book that title, sorry, is because of the various different experiences that I have had in my life. And over time, and as I evolved and as I grew wiser uh, through the various self improvement workshops and readings and things that I've done to improve myself, I've learned that I've realized and also learned that the stories, like life has things happen to you.
Hmm.
We have no control over what happens to us. We have no control over our environment. It's just an environment. You could have two people in the same environment, take two siblings, growing up in the exact same household, but their experience is going to be slightly different because of their mindset, because of where they are in their mindset, because of the emotional state, because of the way they perceive things around them. So from that, I kind of realized that with the various different experiences that I've had in my life, example, when I was in my 20s, miscarriage, rejection, that kind of stuff, with culture, growing up in a community and a different culture and things like that, comes with its well, what is a better word to use here? Comes with its sense of limiting beliefs maybe, and things need to be done a certain way. If you experience anything bad, then people kind of, if you don't fit into the box, then there's
Oh,
something wrong with you. And then you kind of get pushed to the side in some way. How does a person deal with that? How everybody wants to belong somewhere. Everybody
right.
wants to feel that they are worthy, that they are loved, and that they belong somewhere. right? Um, and it's over time that I realized that the way I perceive the world around me, the way I allow those thoughts that come into my mind and those experiences that I have, the way I allow it to affect me, is that becomes my reality.
Oh, wow.
That basically becomes my reality. Initially, I did not realize that I was actually doing this to myself in some weird way. We don't want to blame ourselves for things, but it took a lot of realization and a lot of hard pills that I had to swallow. That ultimately, we are responsible for our own lives and the way we absorb what's going on around us and how we react to that. So, that whole sense of accountability, there's a whole lot of other stuff, but this is just kind of in a nutshell
No,
what
no.
big realization that I came to, which I fought for a while as well, because I was like, no, but I don't control the other person. That person did something or said something and it affected me. How is that possible that another person's actions or words can affect me to such a degree that I start to feel bad and I go into this negative spiral that just keeps taking me down? And then, there's this mantra that goes on in your head that you're like, okay, I'm not good enough. This person's better than me. This person can do these things. I can't do it. It's all that negative thoughts, and you continually repeat that. It's amazing how thoughts have such power over us. So if we twist that around, turn it around, and we only have those positive thoughts, and we build ourselves up, we have a foundation, we build ourselves up, and we provide that love for ourselves first before we even go out into the world and give it to anyone else. We're starting from a whole different ground,
Yeah.
a whole different level, instead of the whole world around you controlling how you're going to behave and what you're going to do and those kind of things.
No,
So,
Amelia,
yeah.
you're bringing up a couple of interesting points. One is on this show and on a number of our shows, we've talked about
Mhm.
the self critic, and definitely I know I've been guilty of that, even in this particular place that I'm at right now, this particular
Mhm.
cultural arts center. I know that there have been jobs that I have had that whole conversation with myself as to whether I should apply for the job or not apply for the job. And then by the time you going for the job has already left the building. And that's just one example. But I've also
Mhm.
had it in my romantic life, because even at 62, I'm still in that perpetual single state and all in that kind of way. And sometimes there'll be somebody that I might want to pursue, and you'll have that whole inner conversation about, I should ask her out. No, I shouldn't ask her out. I should ask her out. And by the time you finally get around to asking the person out, they have already moved on and all
No.
along those lines. So I was just wondering your thoughts about how to deal with that whole inner critic, because we can be our worst enemies sometimes, and you kind of alluded to that. So just wondering your thoughts about how to deal with that inner critic, because we can be our own worst enemies outside of what other people might be saying about us as well.
Exactly, and that is exactly spot on. Being your own critic, but also your own worst enemy. And an example of that is, and I can use that from my own personal life because I think I've lived this over and over again, many times until I finally decided, you know what, I need to stop doing this to myself because I am setting myself up for failure. There
Right.
is nobody around me that's setting me up for failure. I'm doing this to me. So, what am I going to do differently? And it just takes a whole lot of self talk and a lot of internal sort of awareness that, and it does involve you talking to yourself and trying to understand and figure out, okay, this is how I feel. Why am I feeling this way? What is what is happening? Where is this coming from? Where is this feeling coming from? Did I experience something maybe years back that kind of stuck with me, and I'm just repeating the same cycle now in another way with a different experience, and I'm doing the exact same thing subconsciously? I don't even realize I'm doing it, so I'm sabotaging myself in many ways. Um, and I think the biggest thing is self love and knowing that you are worthy, and that is the biggest thing that has come up for me as I'm grieving the loss of my husband who passed away 4 years ago from pancreatic cancer. um, my whole life revolved around our family. He was, our family structure was such that he was the one who went out to work. I stayed home. I worked whenever, periodically, whenever we felt it was feasible for the family for me to go out. But on the whole, I was home with the kids. My job was taking care of my family, and I loved doing that. When he passed, I had the biggest shock of my life. I had to rediscover who I was, who I am, because who I was doesn't exist anymore. That role that I played does not exist anymore. Yes, I'm still a mother. I have three amazing kids, but the mother that I am to them now is not the same mother that I was when my husband was around because of the various different roles that I have to play in their life now. He had his it's think of it like a team. If you're in a sports team, right?
Right.
One player is missing in that group. In that, how is that game going to actually be a true game?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So now you're playing one player short and you're doing the best that you can.
Mm-hmm.
So I have had many, many, and I still have those instances where I am like, oh my God, I can't do this. That is the first thing. It's normal to feel that way, that you can't do something, because that's the fear. Fear makes us feel like we can't do things because it's something that maybe a road that you haven't walked on before. So you're afraid. What's going to happen? Why am I, how am I going to do this? All of those things come up. The biggest thing that I've learned is to acknowledge that fear, okay? To say, yes, I'm feeling afraid. I've not done this before.
Right.
But what do I have? What strengths, what do I have at my disposal right now that I can use to help myself, and I'm going to take baby steps and I'm learning all the time. Just adopt that attitude of being a learner and being curious and asking for help. It's really embarrassing at the age that I am to be asking for help in specific areas where I should already know these things,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
But I've adopted that attitude and that I'm learning. I've not done this before. And I need to go to somebody who knows how to do it. If that person teaches me or shows me how to do it, because it's the whole idea of teaching a man to fish and not fishing for them. So, reaching out for help, finding out how you can help yourself, because ultimately, bottom line, we have to help ourselves first before we go out and even seek any support or help from anyone else. Because if you're going for help, knowing what you need, the kind of help that you're going to get is going to be very different to just shooting in the dark.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What advice would you give to folks? Is actually one of the founders of the network, and she's actually, I think it was 2 years ago. It was definitely during the pandemic that she lost her husband, and she was actually, from what I understand from talking to Kim, and she's one of the founders along with Nick Valveda and everything, Kim Calhoun, that her and her husband were like that storybook romance. They met in, I want to say, college or maybe it's even before that, and were married forever, had 11 kids, and
Yes.
definitely all in that space. And there was a time frame that, and I don't think I'm speaking out of school because she even brought it up on some past shows, that she
Mhm.
kind of like withdrew in to herself, and now she's getting back out and actually getting more engaged even in this particular network, because there was a time that she was trying to cope with the loss of somebody that had been part of her life forever and everything. So then that sounds like even your story as well, because I'm imagining that you and your husband, if you've got those kids, had been together for a
Mhm.
minute, and it might have even been one of those it's kind of like storybook type romances and everything, but or it might have been, because I know you're from a different part of the world. It could have been one of those arranged kind of relationships as well, but definitely it became a storybook either way. But what advice would you give to folks that are going through that, whether that is our co-founder or others that are dealing with the grief and the loss of a loved one, particularly the loved one that they have been living with for so long?
Sure. So, yes, you get married, you have all of these dreams, you live your life, you build a life together, and none of us ever think of what would it be like when the other one is not around, when your partner's not around. I surely didn't. I didn't think of it at all. But when it hit me, uh, it took it took a lot of meditation from my side, a lot of solitude, And grief does that to people when you lose somebody so close and your life is basically not, you're basically trying to make sense of, okay, what is this life now? I don't know this new life that has just been thrown into my, this new life that I'm expected to live now, because I've lived a certain way. I've done certain things. I've invested in this relationship, in this marriage, in this family, right? All of that is gone now. How do I make sense of any of this? One thing that I've done to help myself is to remind myself that life is a journey. And
Hmm.
if you look at life as a journey and maybe even a book, we have various different experiences in our life from the time we're born. Some of them we experience, we learn from it really quickly, and we move on, and we don't even sort of remember it because it was so quick, right? Others rock our world to such a point where we are totally derailed and we don't know what to do. Those are the ones that we draw the positive from it. We look for that silver lining, as hard as it may be, and it really tests us in ways that pushes you out of your comfort zone.
Mm.
And that is why being in solitude, especially for me, and I think, a lot of people, I've spoken to a lot of people who are grieving, especially the loss of a spouse. I've lost a mom, I've lost my dad, I've had miscarriages. So this, and the last was losing my husband, which really shook my world, because every time with every other loss that I had, there was a support. My husband was there for me,
Right.
my family was there, or somebody was there for me. This time when I lost him, because he was my rock, he was the person that was behind me, we were there for each other.
Right.
When I lost him, it was like, okay, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and I just feel like I need to give up as well.
Yeah.
It's natural, it's normal, and I had to, basically what I did was like peeling back an onion. When a
Hmm.
person is grieving, this is natural, it is normal. You want to be alone because you need to make sense of what's going on. You need to make sense of, how am I supposed to move forward?
Yeah.
And I reminded myself, I kind of came to the space where I remind myself that it's been a chapter in my life, a really long chapter, a 23-year long chapter. It's been an amazing chapter. I practice a lot of gratitude, a lot of
Mhm.
forgiveness, grateful for the fact that I had the opportunity to love somebody and to be in a relationship with someone for 23 years, with its ups and downs, with everything, with the three beautiful children that we have. That opportunity is just, okay, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
I mean, along those same lines and everything, I was just wondering because you're bringing up so many different questions that I've got on my mind. But one of them is that you talked about grief, and I know that sometimes even in the grief attitude and everything, there can also be the grief of relationships. Because I don't know that every time people take enough time to deal with the relationships when they end, whether they end because of something like a tragedy, like a death or something like that, or whether they just end abruptly because of the nature of relationships. And I
Mhm.
sometimes feel, because I know I've been guilty of it and other people have been guilty of it as well, that we don't take enough time to pause, breathe, and reflect on what's taking place in order to make that next step or that next move and everything. Because I do know that sometimes we're so wanting that romance and that kind of like feel good attitude and everything that we sometimes rush into the next situations without thinking about what taking the time to grieve, whether that's grieving a relationship or grieving a death. And I'd love to hear your thoughts around that because I do think a number of times people just kind of like rush into trying to rebuild things too quickly, whether that is in a regular just dating relationship or that's in a life relationship.
Mhm. Yeah. So, a lot of times when we rush into doing things, or like when you're getting out of something and you rush into another relationship, or it's, I think, and this is just my opinion, I think it's because the pain is so intense. I
Mhm.
don't want to feel this pain. I need to fill this hole as quick as possible so that everything can be normal, my normal, what's normal to me. And whenever we experience any sort of loss, a miscarriage, divorce, there's always things that come with it that we can learn from it. And if we can just take a step back and say, hey, okay, firstly, I don't control the other person,
Right.
right? I don't control the other person. I cannot control how they feel about me. They actually control how they feel about me and how they want to, how much of time they want to be with me, right? I control, it's so funny when I learned this. I control the emotions and the intensity of my emotions that I feel towards my children.
Right.
It's me. I'm creating this reality.
Mm.
It's not the person around me that's creating this reality. So the mother, take it, take take a mother and child relationship, a mother and baby. Let's just do a mother and a baby, right? Why does a mother just feel so much, such intense love, unconditional love towards their infant that sometimes it blinds them to a point where they wouldn't even see any fault in their child?
Right.
It's where is that love coming from? Is it from the child? No, it's not from the child. It's coming from inside of you because we are capable of doing that. We're capable of loving to that degree as well as we're capable of hating to that degree. So it all comes from you. It all starts with you and ends with you. So in those relationships where things go sour and we don't want to be with each other and that kind of stuff, just that first thing of realizing that, okay, it was good while it lasted. I learned things. It felt good to have someone else make me feel special. It really does. It makes you feel worthy. But bottom line, why am I looking for my worthiness from another human being?
No.
We are all on this earth trying to look for that. But
Mm-hmm.
if I know in the ground and the space that I stand in, and I know who I am worthy. Everybody is worthy. We are all um, potential. We can all do anything that we really put our minds to. Something my mom said to me a long time ago. She said that to me when I was a kid as well, and I used to complain to her and compare myself and judge myself and do all of these things. You know what? I see things in you that you are capable of doing these things. You are holding yourself back because you feel you're not worthy. You feel that you're not good enough because others are achieving and you're not. But stop comparing and focus on what you need to do and what do you need to do to build yourself up so you can get to where you need to go. It's all about self-development. It's all about how am I going to improve myself and my life and how am I going to evolve. And that's what kind of sounds like, oh my God, I cannot believe it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. But along those same lines, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts around this. But I know a lot of times there's a old adage, at least in the West, about if you keep making the same mistake over and over again, that is the definition of crazy, and all along those lines. But I find a lot of people in relationships do that. They find themselves going into the same type of relationships, even though they should have learned the lesson from the first time that they went into that relationship and everything. So I was just wondering your thoughts about that, because I know, like I said, I'll admit things I've been guilty of. I've been guilty of that, and I know others that have been as well. So, what are your thoughts around that? That sometimes we are so much wanting to have that success that we keep going into those same traps, even though we see the trap several times over in the same types of relationships and the same type of people and everything.
Mhm. But that's exactly what you said. That's the definition of insanity. It's like making, it's we come to a point where we actually realize, okay, I've been in various relationships and I see this pattern going on here. Um, and I need to put a stop to this. I need to break this cycle, right? Um, what am I going to do? And it always comes back to yourself. It's a hard pill to swallow. It really, really is the hardest thing. But once that mindset changes, and I mean, I'm living proof of this. Once I changed my own mindset that nobody's doing anything to me, I'm doing this to myself, and starting to become aware of what is this pattern that I find myself in. Kids do it too. Oh, this person is so much more better at doing this than I am. I just recently had a conversation with my brother who is trying to help me to understand how to do some bookkeeping and things like that. And he's trying to get me to, explain to me how things work and things. And I made a crazy statement to him that You know what? Your brain is geared towards understanding all of these numbers. I just cannot, for the life of me, you've explained it to me 5 times, I still don't understand. I'm not getting it. Something is not. And he said to me, I it's fine if you don't understand. We'll just find different ways to find out how you can understand this information. But relying on a person to fill that hole that you feel you are not capable of doing is the biggest mistake that you can make for yourself,
Oh, wow.
because you're holding yourself back. Yes, it's difficult for me to learn this, but that doesn't mean somebody else needs to become my crutch.
Mm. Yeah,
It is difficult, and that's a huge thing for me, especially in where I am in my life right now.
mhm.
Right, I can easily grab onto anybody and make them my crutch because it hurts too much. I don't know how to deal with some of these things. I don't know how to make decisions about certain things. But
Mm.
by doing that, by latching onto someone else as a crutch, basically all I'm doing is stopping my growth. I'm stopping myself. I'm being my own worst enemy, like you said in the beginning.
Yeah. No, and along those same lines and everything, I was just wondering because you mentioned the loss of your husband and the loss of parents. Unfortunately, like I said earlier, both of my parents are still living. I've got a brother that is dealing with a serious health issue and everything. It's definitely a issue that it can be terminal, but it's also one you can live with forever and a day and everything. Because even my aunt or one of my aunts that passed lived with this particular ailment for 20 or 30 years and all along those lines. But I can only imagine having no kids of my own. I do have my two nephews and everything, but I do have friends that have miscarried and everything. And as one that is empathetic to a lot of people, I can only imagine what it would be like to lose a loved one, particularly a child, whether that's a child that is a child that you've seen develop, like a teenager or a young child, or a baby and everything. So I just wonder, how are you able to cope with that, even with your husband's help? Because as you said earlier, your husband was living, but when I talk to people that have miscarried, it seems like that is still a burden that many of them still carry with them to this day, even if they were not at fault. It might not have been anything that happened on their side. It just for whatever reason, fate and life took that baby away from them. But I just wondering, how were you able to deal with that? And I don't know how many miscarriages you had. I've got a couple of friends that have had multiple and everything, but it just seemed to me that that would be very difficult to cope with and everything. So,
It is difficult to cope with, and it basically comes down to the same to the same thing. Felt when I had a miscarriage, I felt like, why is this happening to me? I had, with a baby comes so much of hopes and dreams, like it does, like with a marriage, right? When you get married, you have these hopes and dreams and these expectations that sometimes it's unconscious expectations that just come along with it. That it's because of when, as we're growing up, we have these ideas in our mind that we want things to be a certain way. And this is the way I see my life when I finally settle down and have a baby and all of those kind of things, right? And then when that doesn't happen, it pushes you into a space of questioning, judging, criticizing, and a lot of that happens when you lose a baby. You're criticizing yourself, you're judging yourself. There's something wrong with me. Why am I not able to have this baby? And then you start comparing. Others are able to have babies. What's wrong with me? There's something wrong with me. You kind of get into that whole space of, it's not me. Negativity just draws you down. All the weirdest thoughts that go through people's minds. I mean, I can't even touch. I can only imagine the kind of thoughts that go through your mind, because I've been through it and I've had those thoughts as well. That I'm never going to have a baby. This is not going to work out for me. Why is this happening to me? There's a thing about the mind. It is so powerful, and it is also, we attract what we think. We attract what we feel. If we When my third child was actually conceived via IVF,
mhm.
it took us 2 years to conceive her. It was a absolutely daunting experience for me, even for a person who's already had. I had two prior miscarriages. I have two kids that both fine pregnancies, and those kids are, old now, older now. Uh, but when we decided to have our third, it took 2 years of treatment, and it really played with my mind. It played with my mind in so many ways. I was just so negative when things were not working out.
Yeah, I can
And
see
when
that.
that mind, and this is why I say your mind is so powerful. You're finding a way to work with those thoughts that enter your mind, twisting them, turning them around into something positive, and that is where gratitude definitely comes into play.
That makes a lot of sense. That gratitude and all along those lines, you got to have that gratitude, and that importance of gratitude is no doubt about that and everything. But one of the things that we as humans have a tendency to do, and I don't know your faith walk. I consider myself more spiritual than religious, just because of my own attitude towards certain church institutions and everything. But I definitely consider myself spiritual and definitely believe that there is a higher power that controls or acts that is ruling what we are doing and all along those lines. But that being said and everything, I do know that there is a tendency with it when disaster happens to blame the Most High or to blame whatever is going on in that space. I was wondering your thoughts around that, because I know a lot of times whether it's something that is a disaster that we can uh, see in our own lives, like a miscarriage, or whether it's something that is a tragedy in the world, like this pandemic that we just came through, or these kind of
Mhm.
mass shootings that have happened throughout. We always want to be like, why do you allow this? Meaning, why is God allowing this and everything? No matter what your faith is, whether it's Hindu or Buddhist, or whether it's Christian or Muslim or whatever. But I do find a number
Yeah,
of people do that. And I was just wondering your take on that, because a lot of times we try to find something to blame other than ourselves.
exactly. It's, that's the easiest thing to do, is to always point the finger out outwards, right? Instead of looking inside. Um, my thoughts on that is, I don't think God, I'm going to say God, higher power, right, is out there to hurt his children in any way whatsoever.
Right.
Having said that, we are responsible for our own actions,
Mhm.
right? If I've had a miscarriage, I don't think that it was a punishment in any way. It The way I console myself is, I guess it was meant to be. I'm not happy with the outcome of this. I'm not happy that my husband died, but I guess it was meant to be. I am fine. I am fine. All is well. He is taking care of me in ways that I may not even realize, because I'm so stuck in the lack of something that I want, instead of being aware of what I actually have. I have my health. I'm living. I'm safe, right? I'm alive, and I
Yeah.
have the potential to do whatever I need to do. God is not going to. My parents used to always say this: God only helps those who help themselves.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what religion you come. It's got nothing to do with religion. God is only going to help you if He can see that you are putting in your effort to help yourself.
I definitely agree with you on that and everything. Along the same lines and everything, and I kind of alluded to it in my introduction at the beginning. How important is it? And then I've got a follow up question to what I'm going to ask you. But how important do you think it is to um, have a belief in the ancestors? Because I actually do believe in the ancestors and do believe that in some way, if people impacted you, if they have left this planet, that they might still be helping guide you, whether that is memories of what you remember and all along those lines, or whether in some cases they might even be communicating with you through dreams, because I do believe in that kind of power and everything. But I just wanted your thoughts around the importance of being connected to the ancestors, whether they're ancestors that you knew or ancestors that you didn't know. Because I think sometimes the ancestors you might not have even been in the planet yourself when they were around and everything. But I just wanted your thoughts about the connection to the ancestors, because I mentioned earlier, definitely I feel that Baba Chuck Davis, who was a world renowned dancer, still resonates. Some of the messages that he carried through and some of the messages that people still remember, like that love, respect for everybody kind of mantra that he had, that
Hmm.
was there on a
Hmm.
regular basis. And the same with Theo Freeland, who was a well-known architect that developed the African American Cultural Museum in D.C., and a number of others that have passed on. That either, if whether it was their memories, like my cousin Sarah, or other things that I have memories of them, and sometimes I feel that they are still communicated with me. Like I still sometimes feel that my grandmother Molly is, and she passed like what, 82, so that would have been like almost 40 something years ago. I still feel that she resonates with me on a lot of different levels. But I just want your thoughts about the connection to the ancestors.
I really do. I actually, there's so much to that. I'm not too well versed in it, but I do feel a connection to my own ancestors as well. I do believe that the way I think of it is I am here where I am right now because of the actions of people in my family down the line, my ancestors.
Right.
I might have originated, they may have originated in a specific, I wish I could go all the way to the beginning to actually understand my lineage.
Mhm.
It would be really interesting to find out all the different people that were involved in it.
Right.
In So definitely, there's I speak to my mom. I've spoken to my mom in so many, especially in times because she was so close to me,
Mhm.
and she was my person that helped me make sense of the crazy things that were going on in my life. She never told me what to do. She
Right.
always left me to make my own decisions, but she was my guide, and she did, and I appreciated her sound advice that she gave me. So I felt really, really connected to her. And because of that, even after she passed, I'd be talking to her. I mean, if
Mhm.
somebody see me talking, they'd be like, "Is this woman gone mad? Is she crazy?" It didn't matter to me because when I sit in silence and I actually am contemplating something or trying to make sense of something, and I'm, Mom, can you help me figure this out? Some sign, something, and it's amazing how I may be walking down somewhere and I would see something along the lines of, oh, okay, so yes, that makes sense. And I take those as signs from people who are not around anymore.
Yeah.
So I really do. I believe our ancestors are looking out for us.
Mhm.
They maybe their bodies leave this earth, but I don't think that they actually leave. Their energy
Mhm.
is around. It is there. It's protecting us. It's keeping, watching over us, keeping us safe. There's definitely something to that, and I'm always looking to learn more about all of that stuff. But I believe
Mhm.
in that. I really
Yeah.
do.
Same,
Yeah.
same here and everything. But that's what I was going to ask. I actually, because I get around by mass transit, not necessarily always the car and everything, because I don't have a car. I haven't had a car for ages and everything. But I do get around by the bus, and there is a family that literally lives above me in the apartment complex that I live in and everything, and they are of um, Chinese descent and everything. So it is I think a husband and a wife and their mother and everything. I'm not sure whether it's the mother of the woman that I see or the mother of the man, but so it might be. It's either because I saw them earlier today, so it's either the daughter and mother or daughter and mother-in-law. Because I'm not sure what their relationship is and everything. But that's one of the things that I admire about other cultures. There used to be a time, particularly in the West, that there would be multiple generations that would be staying together, talking together, and now it's become more of a holiday type thing. And even the holidays isn't always the case and everything. But I have definitely seen where in India and definitely even China and some other countries there is this notion, and even some of the Latin American countries of people living together multi generational. So I actually admire the fact that this couple. I mean, some people be like, "Why are you staying with your mom?" But I'm like, this is a good thing. The mom has actually got some health issues because I see her walking with like a type of walker and everything. So I'm like, well, it makes sense to me that they would be keeping their mother and everything. Because I think one time I saw them, they were going to one city over, which is actually the capital city here in North Carolina, to go visit the museum. And today I think they were going to one of our malls to go do shopping together and everything. So I'm like, that makes sense to me. But as one that has traveled, do you feel that sometimes we in the West have gotten away from being connected to the multiple generations? That's what I was going to ask, because I do think that sometimes we here in the West have gotten away from that. But that's one of your thoughts, and I think that if I remember correctly, you have Indian or other background. But I was just wondering your thoughts around this notion of being connected generationally.
Yeah. I really do. Had the ple- I've been able to live in an extended family system, but then also alone.
Right.
So It depends on the dynamics. It depends on what's happening in life. But there's definitely benefits to both sides. So getting the best of both worlds is like you've got the answer, you know how to do it, kind of
Mhm.
thing. Um, Having an extended family system, there are benefits to having grandparents in the house. There's for children because they come from a different generation. They did things differently. My Something I noticed as a parent, we have a certain way we want to parent our children.
Mhm.
Yet, and our parents parented us a certain way.
Right.
Yet, when I have a baby, I have a child, and my parents are with that child, I see different behavior and I
Mhm.
see different, and I always wondered, why is that so?
Mhm.
They've had all the years to parent me.
Mhm.
When it was time for them to be with their grandchildren, they could authentically just be with them. They could, it's like a life respecting life kind of a thing.
Yeah.
They didn't need to put any limitations. They don't need to stop the child from, like, boss the child around, if that's even the right thing to say, because that's how children feel they are, that their parents are always bossing them around, telling them what to do, right?
Yeah.
Grandparents don't do that, but they still have a way of getting through to children.
Yeah. They definitely have a way of getting through the children. I was actually laughing because two thoughts came to my mind as you said that. One is I have a dear friend of mine that is a single mother and a single grandparent because I think she's got four kids, two boys and two girls, if I'm remembering correctly. And I don't think the boys have any kids yet, but the girls have like about five or six kids. So she is definitely a grandparent of four, of about five or six, if I'm remembering correctly. But she is very much that stereotypical doting grandparent. So she loves giving attention, I think more attention to her grandkids than she does to her own kids and everything, even though she does admit that she loves her kids and is glad that even though she didn't necessarily like the gentleman that she divorced that gave her the children, she still loves the fact that she got the children from that relationship, and then she loved the fact that those kids have now given her those grandkids and everything. Like I said, when I call her sometimes because we're very good friends, she'll be sitting there saying that she's, you know, tickling the cheeks or pinching the cheeks of this grandkid or that grandkid. So she is very much the doting grandkid. But then the opposite side of that, which I was also laughing about, is that I remember that my brother was very much the kind of cantankerous kid, the kid that was kind of like a little bit of a rebel, and some people might say a rebel without a cause, and all along those lines. And one of the things that my dad said is that he would be glad when he got married because that means that he would have kids, and that means that he would be able to train the kids to torture him the way that he was tortured himself and everything. So basically, it was like saying that he was going to make sure that those kids gave my brother the hell that he felt my brother and me gave him and everything. Kind of, so he's gonna like train them to torture him as much as they had as much as Malik and my other folks had tortured him and everything. So,
Yeah.
and I've heard that from a couple of people that they, because when I've told that story, they're like, "Yeah, my folks said something similar."
Yeah, children have a way of doing, your children. I mean, I've seen it with my own kids as well, um, that spirit in them and the not wanting to, yeah, just being high spirited. Let me
Right.
just say that, being high spirited and really determined to get what they want the way they want it. And when I started sort of getting really stressed out about it, and then I started doing some self reflecting, and I realized that both my husband and myself are very much the same.
Mhm.
So here I am trying to curb or trying to control a behavior or a tendency in a child that came from us, and I am trying to curb that, but I have the same tendencies in me,
Got the same tendencies. Got
Yes.
the same
So
tendencies in yourself, and you had to recognize that.
that's it. I recognize it. And then, so what do I do with that? Yes, I don't want my kid to harm himself or herself. I don't want them to harm anybody in the world. How do I work with that? What do I do with that? How do I sort of turn that into something positive, not let it become something negative? And that's where the whole, parenting, different styles and different techniques and all strategies and all of that come in. But it's just that whole awareness, becoming aware of something, and okay, I see. Okay, how are we going to turn this into something that is actually going to be beneficial to the person who has this trait, but also to the people that that person comes into contact with.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And speaking of that awareness and everything, I was just wondering because last year or during the pandemic, so it might have been about a year, year and a half ago, I was part of a group that was active in the clubhouse called the Funky Eye Puppets, and it was a gentleman that used to work with George Lucas, and he's definitely involved in kind of audio theater and other kinds of things along those lines. I think he even created a couple of books and everything. But one of the things that IPC, and that's his stage name, who is a haiku poet, talked about, and he's done other things in addition to that, like animation and other things along those lines, is that he felt, because some of us came in from a theater background, some of us did not have a theater background, myself included, even though I've done some limited theater, but he felt that a lot of times we as people, um, once we get into adult ages, we start getting past that whole need of that childlike wonder and all in that space. So we are so busy adulting that we don't want to do things that are childlike, and we don't have that wonderment that was very much prominent we were when we were kids. So I was just wondering, what are your thoughts around that, and are there things that you do in your life in order to maintain that childlike wonder even as you're dealing with the stresses of life and the stresses of grief and all along those lines? So but do you find that it's important to have like some childlike wonder in your life, even at the age that you are at? And I'm not going to, because I'm respectful, I don't ask the woman her age, but even at the age that you're at, do you feel that you still can find that time to have that childlike wonder?
Yes, that is something that I think everybody should not lose that,
Right.
because it helps you when you're a child. There's nothing that you need to worry about. There's no stresses in the world. You don't need to worry about paying bills. You don't need to worry about where the next anything is going to come from. They live in the moment. Children live in the moment. Young children, especially when you look at really young children, they're so connected to the source.
Right.
They live in the moment, and they will have a disagreement because I want this, you have that, I'm going to get it from you, and I'm just going to take it. There'll be a little bit of distress there, but you turn your head around, and they're back to just everything is normal, no hatred, no bad feelings, nothing. They're just working together as if nothing happened.
Right.
That in itself, I mean, we can learn from that. I i don't need to hate you because of your action. I don't need to yes, I don't like your action. I'm not saying condone anybody's action. That is
Right.
not where I'm going at all. But just having that sense of curiosity and just living in that childlike wonder and trying to nurture that and hang on to that as long as you can helps with just going through life and the various different, because life's like a roller coaster. You never know when something's going to hit you.
Yeah,
So I just keep that curious mind and always just keep asking questions. So I wonder if I do it this way instead of that way. Yes, this is the normal way to do it, but I'll try it a different way as long as I'm not hurting myself or somebody else.
yeah.
Let's do something different here. Work with us.
Yep, no doubt. That wild childlike wonder is very important. I wish more people had that in everything. The other thing I was curious about, and I was wondering your thoughts around this, is I know that a lot of times as people get older, there's this notion that, particularly in the West, that you need to put them in some sort of hospice or home care. And one of the things that I've always admired is those cultures that are willing to take care of their elderly as they are getting older and everything along those lines. But I just wondered your thoughts about that. And I'm not saying that you can't sometimes have the
Yeah.
necessity to put people into those care, but I assume sometimes think that certain cultures rush into that situation. But I was just wondering your thoughts around that.
That definitely depends on what is going on at the time and what's needed to be done, what needs to be done for the benefit of everybody, including the person who's, in our specific case, with my husband, he had pancreatic cancer.
Right.
He was at home for as long as he could stay home until things became so intense that, I mean, being his wife, but also being his caregiver, because he refused to have anybody else do anything for him. He only wanted me to do everything for him. So it became so intense that they were like, he has to go into hospice, and he fought it. He refused to go. He was like, I'm not going to hospice, because it he probably unconsciously in some weird way felt that if he left, that connection was sort of, there's a bigger gap
Hmm.
with that connection between us. When he's at home, we closer.
Right.
That space, we in the same space. But it was hard for him. It was hard for all of us. But we had to let him go to hospice. We had no choice. There are other situations where, in my dad's case, he lived with my brother till the day he died.
Wow.
He had his needs. He had his things that we took care of his needs, whatever medical, all of that kind of stuff that he needed help with. But I would not. We wouldn't consider putting him into an old age home unless it was deemed necessary.
Right.
He was not. It does take a lot of adjusting your life because of the various needs. But if you have a child with special needs,
Right.
right? You're not going to put that child with special needs into a facility because that child is creating havoc in your life or making your life so unbearable. So
Yeah.
why do we need to do that to our elders? I'm going to be old one day too. I
Hmm.
have no idea what the future holds in store for me.
Right.
But I think we need, it's important, and I say this very loosely because it also does depend it's on a needs basis. It depends on what's going on at that very moment and what needs to happen. It's not There's no judgment here whatsoever. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The other thing I was wondering about, even when it comes to grief and everything, because everybody grieves differently and they grieve different ways and everything. And I know that sometimes people are wondering about some of the grief tactics, because a lot of times there are some people that are thinking that you should, grieve within um, a certain amount of time and then give your time, self time for healing and all along those lines, and to move on into whatever that next phase of life is. But then I know other people that carry reminders of their lost ones and they never leave those reminders. I mean, I've known a couple people that literally have the urns and the ashes of their loved ones and they stay with them at all times and everything. So in those cases, I wonder how much of that is permanent grief, because if you still have the reminder, then you might still have the reminder, both the positive, but also, I don't know if you've ever let go and everything. But I just wondering your thoughts about that and everything, because I do know there's some people that are, it might be something as sentimental as a dress or if you're a lady, or a bat, or some sort of game equipment like a
Sure.
golf tee or something if you're a guy. And I'm using
Yeah.
those very stereotypical kind of examples and everything. Or it might be something more physical, like the urn that I know some people that have carried with them for the duration of their life. But I just wanted your thoughts as to people carrying memories and whether there should be a point of time that they let go, for lack of a better term.
So, this hanging on to something that is tangible is
Hmm.
just a way of keeping, and this is my opinion.
Right.
I just from my own experience, and this is just my opinion, and it can work for some, it can maybe not work for others.
Right.
Grief is that kind of a thing that each person has to work with it to the best of their ability with their composition, mental and emotional composition. So somebody might be able to bounce back quickly and make sense of things and go with it. Others, it may take longer. I need to hold on to this because it reminds me of what I had.
Right.
If I let go of what I had, I don't know if I'm ever going to get that again. So, in my own personal instance, just letting go of the past
Mm.
has helped me in so many ways of not feeling stuck. When you're afraid, that fear keeps you stuck. And when you're stuck, you don't want to move.
Hmm.
But life is meant to be lived, life is meant to be experienced.
Right.
And when you allow yourself to be stuck, you basically cheat yourself of any experience. So holding on to things, yes, it's fine. but holding on to it for a reasonable amount of time, but working towards letting go is different to holding on for dear life. This is what gives me reason to live, or gives me, it's like a crutch. Basically, it boils
Yeah.
down to some, it's sort of like a crutch. But yes, I know I have this memory of a person that I loved. It makes me feel connected to them. I'm going to keep it with me, but I also know that I'm not going to latch onto this tangible thing, because this is not going to help me grow and evolve and move forward. So there's a plan in the background that there is the intention of letting it go at some point.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. Just really quickly, and we'll maybe go another 15, 20 minutes if that's okay with you and everything, because I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. By the way, I don't want to take too much of your time, but hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have and everything. But one of the
Yeah.
things I was curious about, because it's something we talk about a number of times on the online dinner party and on a variety of our other shows here on Pod TV, is this notion of the work-life balance. And I'm sure you had a work-life balance, particularly when you had the husband, and definitely
Hmm.
still have it with the kids and everything. But I was just wondering, how do you manage that, and how do you do that work-life balance? I'm thinking part of that is meditation, which you seem to be very much a proponent of, and all along those lines. But I just wondering, how do you manage that work-life balance? Because I know a lot of times it can be very difficult for people. I know people that are trying to do work-life balance, and sometimes it's multiple work. Because I have some friends that are maybe like in the music business, but also doing gig work as well. So I know that
Hmm.
work-life balance can be very difficult. But I just wondering, how do you manage it?
So work-life balance basically is what is, and I think it's different for each person.
Mhm.
What are your values? What is important to you, and how do you see your um, family life and your work life? And how do you allow those two areas of life to, how do you give enough time to both of those areas of life? And to me, in my own in my own life, my children come first. So whatever I have to do, I'm always revolving it around making sure that my children's needs are taken care of first. But that is just my preference. It
Right.
doesn't need to be, so for each person it would be different. And based on that, I basically work my schedule and my life and everything else around that. Uh, because I'm just really passionate about, I've always been passionate about children.
Mhm.
I My kids are just really very, very important to me, and it makes me feel good when I know that I'm there for them, to guide them, to help them, to be there for them in any way that they need. They need me to be there for them, not the way I want to be there for them. But they're older now. My children are much older, so each one of them needs me in a different way. And when they need me, I want to be there for them. But as a person who has now suddenly become the sole adult, so adult inverted commas here, in the house, um, that also has had its the different challenges, and I've just been trying to think out of the box ways that I could provide for my family, but also be there for them. So
Yeah, because I imagine, like you said earlier, there was a time that they had um, the children in your life, the uh, both figures. They had both the male and the female, and now you're probably having to play both roles and even give advice to the male members of your family that in the past would have been given by your husband and everything, and even being engaged in some of the games that he might have been taking them to, and now you got to take them to them as well. So I imagine that has been a change for you, and having to learn some things that you were in the past depending on him to do and everything. Because I've seen that happen with other cultures as well, where sometimes you're used to doing like maybe you're used to doing the cooking and he's used to going to the baseball game or the
mhm,
cricket game or whatever,
yeah.
and now you've got to do both of them.
Yes, and the thing is, it was when the dynamics were that, when he was alive, the dynamics were a certain way, right?
Mhm.
And it worked. The dynamics are different right now. There is no point in comparing.
Right.
There is no point in even going down, because this is another thing that I found. Whenever I went down the path of, oh, he's not here. If he was here, he would have done this and he would have done that. I wouldn't have had to worry about these things. This is not fair. Why did this happen to me? When I go down that path, basically all I'm doing is saying to myself, I'm not capable. I need another human being to get things done for me. I'm not saying when he was there, he did his share, I did my share. We did our parts, we played our
Right.
parts. That's not the life I'm living right now. The life I'm living right now is it all starts and ends with me
Hmm.
when it comes to my family, right?
Right.
I'm the eldest in this family right now. So it all starts and ends with me. How are we going to make this work? What are we going to do? And communication has played a very big role in between the children and myself, keeping our communication open, making sure we know what we feel about things, expressing ourselves, pushing each other, making sure that we kind of understand this person needs his space, give him his space. But
Mhm.
I'm going to still keep watching him because I don't want him going into a dark place where he doesn't need to go. Because
Did you find that there was because I think sometimes this happens in family dynamics. I actually saw it on a TV show recently and everything. I think it might have been Chicago Fire, which is a local, well, a national television show and everything. But the young lady that was in the TV show was diagnosed with lung cancer, and it was very interesting watching the reaction of the children because they had, I think, 4 or 5 children. The gentleman that was playing the firefighter and his wife who had the lung cancer, but one of the children was very much very emotional. The other was trying to be a little bit more stoic and
yes,
everything, but you could see
yes.
the different reactions. So I was wondering, did you find that with your own kids that they had different reactions to handling their grief and everything? I'm thinking one of them might have been all balled up in tears at the loss of their father, and the other one might have been a little bit more stern and a little bit more kind of stoic, as I said earlier, and everything. But I
Yes.
just wondered, did you find that they reacted differently to their loss?
They did. They did actually. At the time when my husband passed away, my oldest was 16, my middle son was 14, and my daughter just turned 7.
Mm,
So developmentally, when you look at development and the way the brain develops and things like that, and how children play and how they absorb information and emotionally where they are at that specific age in their life, they're going to react to a life changing situation like this in very different ways. And also, of course, their personalities and the intensity of their emotion also plays a big role in this.
mm,
So that's what makes all of us unique, right?
right.
We're all unique human beings. Um, my oldest son took to sport.
Mhm,
And I think the fact that he took to sport, he was doing cross country.
mhm,
He did a lot of running, but he had his coach, and he had there was a group of them that were really close.
mhm,
So that became his support and his go-to place as he was dealing with all these various emotions,
right.
grieving his dad is dying. Because this, with my husband passing away, it was a slow, gradual process. It happened over months,
Mhm,
such a long time. There was a point where they said, there's no hope for him, he's gone. And he pulled through that.
mhm,
And he still lived, after he pulled through that, he lived another 8 months.
yeah,
So our, doctors and the medical field was saying things to us that this is it. So mentally and emotionally, we prepare ourselves for this to happen, right? My husband was a fighter. He wasn't ready to go. He really wasn't ready to go. He somehow got through that, lived through another 8 months. So all of those emotions and just living that way, I guess the kids worked in various different ways. So the first one took to sport and his group. My middle guy took to video games
mhm,
and to solitude.
right.
Solitude is dangerous in some ways, but if you're watching it and you're aware and you keep communication channels open, I gave him his space.
Mm,
My youngest, hers was more through play. So I kind of, and she wouldn't say something to me. She just seemed like everything was fine. She didn't really show any, like, oh, dad, this or why this or nothing of that sort. There was play therapy that I got her involved in. So through the play therapy, we would be able to keep an eye on if anything was coming up. So it was on my part. I kind of had to be a little proactive and a bit sort of being two steps ahead as I was observing these kids
Hmm.
and knowing their personalities, um, and then just working with what came my way. I I didn't have all the answers. I did not have all the answers, and I still don't have all the answers today. But I'm a firm believer in dealing with what is in front of you.
Yeah. And like you said earlier, sometimes the diagnosis can be one that you can expect, but if you've got a fighter in your life, then sometimes they will live past what you were expecting and everything. Because I know that there was a friend of mine that passed away. This is 2023, so 2024 actually. So they passed away about 3 years ago, and
Mhm.
everything along those lines. But they were diagnosed terminally. I want to say about a year or two before they passed away, but they definitely had that kind of attitude that you were talking about with your husband. They had that fighter attitude, so they were actually not going to go out without a fight and all in that land. So definitely, I
Mhm.
do remember that they were very much involved in the art community here in this area, and they had originally moved here from the New York area and all in that space, but definitely was known for being a fighter. And I think that they were going to live their life fighting to the very end. Because actually, I don't think I found out the day it passed until there was one of those night of the like a celebration that was honoring people that had passed, and you bring pictures of folks that had passed and everything. And that's when I saw her picture. I was like, wait a minute, I didn't even realize that she had passed and everything because she was one of those fighters and everything. And that's when I realized that she passed when I saw that picture, and that was like maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago that I saw
Mhm.
that in that particular celebration because that's what it was. It was a celebration of life. It was one of those
Yeah.
Latin American celebrations where you bring pictures of those that have passed on that you want to keep alive in your memories and all
Mhm.
in that space. So definitely that was very powerful and everything. There are three words that you have used, and I know they came up even in your podcast guest profile, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about what it means to embrace, empower, and evolve. So definitely, I know that a lot of times with something that we all try to do and everything, but I just wondered what that means to you.
Yeah. What that means to me, and that's something I came up with as I've been grieving and walking this road. And grief is something that actually, the way I see it, it is a new companion in my life,
Mhm.
and I don't see it in a negative light. It has helped me to learn more about myself. And the moment I decided to embrace the fact that um, my husband is not around, physically not around. He's,
Right.
we can go there too, but yes, he's physically not around. And the moment I decided to embrace this is life for me right now, and I can do, I can make or break, I can do anything. The power is all in my hands.
Mhm.
That is me in my way embracing my reality. And then finding ways to empower myself, things like meditation, breath work, affirmations, subliminal music. There's this high frequency music that also helps, that you kind of talks to your subconscious mind as you're sleeping. You play the music and it kind of, reprograms your subconscious mind in ways. So dabbling with that kind of stuff, um, and just trying to learn more about the limiting beliefs that I have, what stops me from doing something that I would like to do, but I still find myself stuck in this pattern, the cycle of, you know, attracting the same kind of situations or experiences in my life. So how do I change that? How do I get out of that? So that is me embracing, empowering myself in different ways. And evolution is just a symptom. It's the outcome is what happens automatically when you invest in yourself, invest in improving yourself, learning about yourself, getting in tune with yourself, because we're not, I don't think anybody is bad and anybody wants to hurt anybody. We just do it out of fear.
Right. I can definitely see that in everything. Why do you think, and this you may not have any answers, but maybe you have some philosophical answers, but it does seem that we have gotten into a very divisive period of the world, and it's not just here in the United States. It seems to be all over. I've even seen it in parts of India when I've read the news, and definitely in other parts of the world as well. But why do you feel that we are in this divisive kind of attitude, and do you think that there is going to be a change? Because I've heard some people that are in the empathic phase and empathic belief system that feel that we're on the dawn of a new age, and that this new age will be a more positive age, and we might be going through the dark times before the light and everything. But I just wanted your thoughts about this division and whether you see some positivity around the corner.
Yes, I think, evolution is something, I mean, from my limited knowledge, and there's so much more I still have to learn, I do believe. But from the various different things that I've read and from all different cultures, all different religions, I really like to learn from everywhere, not just one specific place. Excuse me. But it definitely, we are heading into that direction of um, people being more aware. It's been happening slowly over the past couple of decades, but I think we're at a point to where um, the more people are in tune with who they are and what they're
Mhm.
capable of, and this whole power of attraction and all of that kind of stuff, we we are able to then understand and actually resonate with that a different level kind of a thing.
Mhm.
So it's like with a video game, we were playing at this level down here,
Mhm.
and this is the level that we could understand and master and do everything. But there is a breakthrough, and it happened over some decades where we're moving to a higher level of consciousness in some way. And
Yeah.
because as humanity we're doing that, we're going to find that things are going to be different.
Yeah.
But
And
these things happen over time. It's not like wow, just at the snap of a finger.
no, they definitely take some time, and it is a process, like you said. Do
Yeah.
you think that we are doing a good enough job as a society of taking care of ourselves? Because I know a lot of times people are concerned that they, myself included, aren't eating well enough, aren't doing enough exercise, and probably need to do better in the meditation period, even though I will turn off the TV and find some time for some self reflection and all along those lines. But I just wonder, do you think that we're doing a good enough job of that? And what are some of the tools that you use to encourage people to take that moment to kind of like self reflect?
One of the best ways to actually self reflect is to journal.
Mm.
I've been journaling from the time I was a teenager. My mom had told me one time when I was a teenager and I would complain to her about whatever, teenage issues. Uh, why don't you write it down? You don't want to say anything to me. Write it down. Keep a journal, write it down. And what I noticed about journaling, you can do various different forms of journaling. You can have a journal where you have your plan, your life planned out of the various different things that you want to do in your life. You can have a journal of a list of things, like a bucket list kind of things. These are I have to do this by this age and all that kind of stuff. Or you can have a journal to just say, to sort of process your day,
Mm.
which is the way I use the journal. I started the day off like this. This is what happened, and this is what happened to me, and this is how I feel. When I look back, what I've noticed is when I look back at that, maybe a few months down the line or a year down the line, I kept a journal as I was pregnant with my boys. And when I was reading that journal the other day, wow, and I know who I am right now, how I feel about certain things. And when I read that journal, it kind of gave me insight into who I am and how I view things.
Right.
So you can actually become your own. You have a way of helping yourself in so many ways by when you journal, when you meditate, and when you actually take a hold of a sign or a message or something that comes to you and you just explore it.
Mm.
Just explore it, become aware of it, explore, and ask those thought-provoking questions of yourself. Where is this coming from? Why is this happening? How did this happen? The what, when, where, how, why, how. I
Right.
just kind of apply that to it, and then see what comes out of that,
Yeah.
and then you work with that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know that I had found some old notes that I'd found, and there was a former journalist because I had written down some thoughts and some other things going on, and I remember finding those some 10 years after I've written them, or even maybe in some cases 20 years after I've written them. And you're right to reflect on that and to see the different ways and the different thoughts you're having compared to what you're thinking now. It is definitely eye opening because I remember going like, I was thinking that. Why was I thinking that? And a lot of those kind of things. So you do find those kind of like reflective moments where you're going like, why was I thinking that particular thought and everything in that space? But it also gave you some perception in terms of what's going on in your life now, because some of the things that were going on then might be similar to what's going on now as well. So it does
Exactly.
give you some uh, grounding, for lack of a better term, and everything. So it gives you some grounding in all in that space. As we get to wind down, and I've, like I said, thoroughly enjoyed this conversation and everything. What is something that you think folks would be surprised to know about you and everything that they've been hearing this conversation, or maybe they've known you for years and everything? But what is something that folks would be surprised to know about Ashmita and everything that if they were to find out, I mean, they'll be finding out now that it might surprise them. Like maybe you decide that you have an interest in going skydiving, or maybe you have this desire to travel to Tunisia or some other place. But what is something that is on your bucket list or interest list that might surprise folks about you?
Well, I always believe that I'm a free spirit. And I don't know if anybody actually knows that about me, but I know that about me. I've always been a free spirit and I don't like being tied down.
Gotcha.
I'm loyal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a loyal person. I'm a loyal, to my cause or whatever I'm involved in. But I'm free, and I think that is something that takes has taken me to various different experiences and different things in life. Um, and yeah, just take it as it comes and deal with it as long as I'm positive and I have that faith that there is a higher power that is looking out for all of us.
Yeah.
And there's
That
a
makes,
lesson to be learned in everything that is happening.
yeah.
So
Yeah, definitely lessons to be learned and everything that happens in our lives and everything. I was just wondering because I had a guest on that long ago. It's actually about 3 days ago that he was on, and everything. Or actually, it would have been the regular online dinner party, so it would have been on Wednesday, so 4 days ago. And he is in the pet world, so he's definitely involved in pet care and everything in that space. I can't remember whether he was in the New York area or the Southwest area around Texas or something like that. But either way, he's been involved in pet care, and I know that sometimes that can be our first experience in grief and everything. And I was just wondering your thoughts about the importance of pets and also dealing with that loss as well, because in our lives we know that many a dog can live for a long life, as can a cat, but if they're only going to be with us, say, 15 to 20 years at the maximum in some cases, then we might in a lifetime go through three or four of our pets.
mhm,
Like I said, that can be our first experiences in grief, and if it's the lesser of, well, I shouldn't say lesser, but the smaller animals like fish and something like that, it might even be multiple times because they don't really stay
yeah,
that around that long and everything. So I just wanted
yeah.
your thoughts about that being, particularly as kids, our first experiences in grief.
Yes. So it's funny that you said this, but when my husband was just a few months before he died, we had got two Shih Tzu puppies, a
Hmm.
male and a female from the same litter, and the male did not make it to a year.
Well,
So he died just before he turned a year old. So
mhm.
my husband had already died by this, passed away by this time, and yeah. So this puppy died. Um, my middle son, had taken to him, built a real bond with him.
Right.
I think bringing the puppies into when we were dealing with all this craziness in our lives was really therapeutic for the kids. It gave them
Mhm.
something to be distracted and someone else to care about.
Right.
When you're caring for another, you forget your own sorrow. You forget your own, yeah, you just forget all of that because you're so involved and it draws you so much, especially if you're enjoying what you're doing.
Right.
And with those little puppies, they kept them so busy that the kids really didn't think too much about other things that normally would have, pulled them down. At the time when we were told by the vet that he has a platelet issue and there is no, he's going to be having this issue all the time and we do need to let him go. Um, I had this discussion with my son. So I know you're attached to him. How do you feel about everything that the doctor is saying? So we spoke about it, and I had to allow him to, not I had to, I mean, he needed some time to spend with Leo. Leo, his name was Leo. He
Right.
had needed to spend some time with Leo alone so that he could make his peace, or he could, just feel that this was a real good lesson for him in some way, because it basically came down to this. I care about this dog. I care about Leo, but it is time for us to say goodbye now.
Right.
I don't control what's going to happen because it's clear to me that I don't have control over. I can't make him better,
Right.
which is a very similar situation that I was in, and when my husband was in his last, anyway, let's talk about my son here. Um, so mentally, he had to prepare himself to let go.
Right.
And that involved giving him some space and some time alone with Leo, just him and Leo. And eventually, then it took him a few hours. They were sitting there for a few hours. And then he was like, okay, I understand why this needs to happen.
Right.
When we make up our mind and we understand and we tell ourselves that we know why something needs to be the way it is, things become so much more easier to work with. When we feel like we're being cheated of something, or we feel like, then we want to fight back. It's just natural human
Right.
reaction. I want to fight back. Why did this happen to me? Somebody did this to me. But death is not something that anybody controls. Nobody does death to anybody, right?
Right.
When you die, you die.
Right.
We don't control when we're going to die. Just,
Right.
just the act of dying. I'm not talking about,
Right.
other things, but we don't control the moment we're going to die. So,
No.
with the people who are left behind, the way I make sense of it in my mind is he's he came, he did what he had to do. I have to, by me latching on to that attachment that I have to him, the only thing I'm doing is holding myself back,
Gotcha.
because he came here, he did his thing, he's gone.
Hmm. How do you make sense, just really quickly in that same line and everything, of, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, but of the sudden grief versus the grief that is less sudden and everything? Because I know that that became a conversation with many during the pandemic, where a lot of people were facing a sudden loss. And of course, we see it when people are dealing with a car wreck or something like that, versus that is a situation where you are expecting it. Like I said, you had been dealing with the expected loss of your husband that was going to happen eventually.
At
You
some
might not
point,
know the exact time, but you knew that that was going to be
it's going to
the
happen.
end result, just the same as I mentioned with my friend, or family friend, Michelle Gonzalez Green, and everything. That was a terminal illness. So in some terminal illnesses, like even mentioned with my own brother, may have an extended stretch that could last 15 or 20 years and everything. But then there are those that face that sudden, like it just happened suddenly. He stepped outside and he got hit or something like that. And it seems to me that that's a harder grief. So I was just wondering, when you were talking to people that have gone through grief and even giving them counsel, how do you give counsel for those that had that more sudden type of grief, where it wasn't expected?
Right. So when something happens suddenly, definitely we're in shock,
Right.
right? Your body goes into shock. And when you're in shock, what happens? It's sort of, you're almost in like a fight and flight mode,
Right.
right? When and this is just my logical brain thinking about this on a logical level here,
Right.
right? Um, when you know there's a terminal illness and you know that the percentage is higher that this person is going to die at some point, you just don't know when.
Right.
There's a little bit of that. I mean, it's also, it's terrible because it's like you feel like you're being toyed with in some weird way, right? Because you don't know. I mean, you prepare yourself for something and it doesn't happen, and it's just this prolonged thing until eventually it does happen. But then you still, I mean, grief is grief. So you're
Hmm.
still going to grieve. End of the day, you're still going to get to that point where you're grieving, right?
Right.
But with anticipatory sort of loss,
Hmm.
I'm anticipating that this is going to happen. Uh, like places like hospice and all of those places, they start preparing the family. They prepare
Right.
the person with the terminal illness. Those 5 stages of grief,
Hmm.
which I only learned after doing more reading, that was actually developed more for people with terminal illness. These are the stages that they go through:
Right.
anger, denial, and eventually they come to acceptance of the illness.
Hmm.
It is not, I found it very difficult to fit into any one of those boxes as a person who's grieving the loss of someone.
Right.
So the stages or the various different emotions that you go through as you're grieving is different. It's not anger, denial. Yes, acceptance is there. There's similarities, but it's not those five.
Right.
So yeah, I
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense, and I like the way you phrased that and everything. As we end in the show and all along those lines, this has been a very profound show, and definitely gave a lot of insight that people need to have, and all along those lines and everything. One of the things I get all of my guests to do, and I'm definitely going to do with you as well, and I kind of think that it adds some levity to every show, but it also adds some very profound thoughts as well. But if you can tell folks how you can be reached, the title of your book once again that we talked about at the beginning, and like I said, I love that title of the book because I think we all do have a story in us and everything, and all in that space. And definitely one of the things that I do with all my guests is that, as I alluded to earlier, these are some very interesting times that we live in, but I am one that believes in positivity. So if there is a message of positivity that you want to share with our global audience, I'm sure that both myself as well as the founders of the network and others would love to hear that message of positivity, because that's something that I give everybody a chance to do, because I figure the more positivity we spread out there, the more it can take on that life of its own and everything, and create some positive attitudes and positive results and everything. So I think if we
Mhm.
spread positivity, we can create positivity as well.
Sure.
So I give all my guests that opportunity to give a message of positivity. So if you want to share anything that you didn't get to that we've talked about today, but I think we've covered a lot of things, and I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I would love to have you come back whenever you're available and everything. I know there are different time zones and everything, so we might have to do another special edition, but whenever you're available, I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and hope to maybe one day get to your neck of the woods and actually see you in person as well and everything. But would love to
Sure.
do that as well. But definitely
Thank
any
you.
ways that you can share anything that you did not have an opportunity to share that you want to share, your ways to be reached in terms of the book and your message of positivity.
Sure. Yes. So, yes, the name of my book is called What's Your Story? Number one way to creating a new reality with your thinking. I have a website called it's storyyoutellyouself.com. Um, and I can be reached through my website. There's a contact me page there, and I can be reached through that way. Um, and I also have, the message that I'd like to send out is experiences don't own us. We all have experiences, and we should always try not to let the experience define or destroy us. Draw positivity out of it. There's always hope. There's always, even just one person, there's always someone or something out there that there is to help. So there is hope. And having said that, I've created this challenge. It's called the Grieve and Grow Challenge. And basically, it has some instructions. I can send that to you, actually. I can email it to you. And if you would like to share it to your audience as well, it'll be really nice. But the intention behind that is to help people who are grieving to take that step out of their grief and sort of do something to help themselves.
Mhm.
So it's like, how am I living with my grief? What is this something positive that I'm doing for myself with this grief that I'm feeling and I'm living? And basically, the instructions are there. You post a picture of yourself, showing yourself doing something um, as you're thriving with grief.
Right.
Oh, yes, I'm happy to share that. I would love that challenge to, to put more momentum to that challenge and see how we can get creative with that, and how it can actually help people be more positive and work. Grief doesn't need to be, it's not scary. It doesn't need to hold us down. Nothing needs to hold you down. It, what lesson am I going to learn here? Let's do this.
Yeah, no doubt, and a great message there and everything along those lines. And I know that you're living currently and have been, like you said, in a number of countries, but you're in the state of Washington. So I just wondered, what is something about Washington, the state, not the D.C., because that's a whole political attitude that
Right.
has surprised you, and all along those lines. I know that it rains all the time in Washington, even though it's not a part of the state that I have been to as of yet and everything. But I was just wondering your thoughts
Yeah.
around the state of Washington, and what is something that surprised you about that particular state?
So I actually moved to Washington in the middle of the pandemic from Michigan,
Okay.
where I spent a good number of years. My kids, that was their home, and we decided to make a new start. So, because I have family here in Washington, I decided to move to Washington. What I like in Washington is the greenery, the number of hikes that you could go to, because I'm a big hiker. I love hiking. I love nature. I like to be out walking around and just climbing and hiking and those kind of things. So I really appreciate that. I do not appreciate the rain and the cloudy skies, but that comes with the package. So that's where my mind comes in, and finding creative ways to not let that get to me. But yeah,
But I mean, but you also came from, as you just said, Michigan, and I went to school in Milwaukee, and I'm thinking in Michigan you might not have appreciated the snow, but maybe you became a fan of the sports teams, because I know that the Lions actually did well in football this year, and the Tigers have not done too bad in a couple of past seasons and everything. So maybe you became a fan of some of their sports teams. I think they have a decent hockey team, if I remember correctly, as well, and everything. And they definitely had a back in the day a great basketball team and everything. So I was just wondering, maybe you didn't appreciate the cold weather the way you don't appreciate the rain as well, because it definitely gets quite cold there in Michigan.
oh yes, it gets really cold, and I always wanted to live in snow, did not realize what it meant to live in snow. So living in Michigan really taught me what it meant to live with snow and to be able to, drive around and things like that. So I appreciated that experience. Learned a lot about living in snowy weather, shoveling your driveway, how to drive on snow, all of those kind of things, which you wouldn't get if you are in a more, in a state that doesn't have that much of snow and things like that. So each place I've moved to has had, just embracing it, learning about it, and then moving on. So
Yeah, that
here
makes
I am
sense.
in Washington. Don't know what the future holds in store, but
Yeah,
we'll
who
see.
knows where the future holds? Maybe it's another trip to another part of the country, maybe the Northeast or the Southeast or the Southwest and everything. But just out of curiosity, because I had a friend and I actually alluded to them earlier in this conversation, because they were one of those that was going through the grief process and all along those lines. How many countries do you think that you have visited? Because I'm thinking that, as I mentioned earlier, that you probably have some of those Indian roots. I'm thinking you probably went at least to parts of India, and then there are probably other countries that you have visited as well. And I've got some friends that have visited multitude. Like I think I got one friend that's been to like 30 or 40 countries, and I've been lucky to get to maybe two or three. The country that we're in, and Turkey when I was a baby, and then technically I guess that those Caribbean nations count on that cruise and everything. So that, but not as many as some of my friends. And I did see when I was looking at your bio that it just seems that you've been a world traveler. So I was just curious, how many places have you been to?
So yes, my ancestors are from India.
Right.
I'm Indian. Having said that, I was not born or brought up in India, but did grow up with Indian culture.
Hmm.
I was born in South Africa, which is where my husband was born as well, and we lived most of our lives until I met him and married him, and his career has taken us to various different places.
Right.
Um, so we lived in the UK for a good number of years, and then we found ourselves in the US. But as just being really curious people and wanting to visit the world as well, we've been to various different places. I have family almost all over the world. Um, to Australia. I've been to New Zealand. I have done a tour of Europe, so Italy, Germany. Did a European tour. Not too long ago went to Greece because it's always been my interest to want to go to Greece.
Okay.
To go to Greece, so I got to go to Greece. I still want to go visit Turkey. I have not touched a lot of Asia. I've been to India as a young kid. I have not been to India since, and that is a place that I really would like to take my kids and go and visit myself as well, because I'm sure a lot has changed from the way I remember. I
Yeah.
hear stories and I hear people talking about, India, this, all that kind of stuff, but I
Mhm.
haven't seen it for myself, so I'm curious. Would love to visit Thailand and some of the other So yes, on the Asian continent, I think I still have some work to do.
Mhm.
But European and the South American continent is another one I still need to visit. So hopefully in this lifetime, I will get to them all. I'd like to. So,
So
yes.
you'll get to visit some of those places. Like I said, Dad was stationed in the Air Force, and I think we were in Ankara, or maybe it was Istanbul, but definitely that was in Turkey. Because literally after I was born, I think that Mom moved there with him when I was 3 months old. So I have no memories of it whatsoever because I was literally there for like
Yes.
3 months to 3 years. Because I think that when I moved back, I was still in that infant kind of like stage and everything. But definitely, I was there as a baby. I understand from my mom that there were some of the Turkish residents that were sitting there spoiling the heck out of a young Mark and all along those lines. But I have no memory of that because I was the infant of that time frame and everything. Just really quickly, and then I want to play this PSA to get us on out of here. But what is a something that surprised you or that you felt was a misconception about both South Africa and UK? Since you mentioned both of those as being places that you had some experiences with.
So, the dynamics of where I grew up and the time in which I grew up was almost, well, I grew up in the time of apartheid,
Right.
and that's how I lived. I had
Hmm.
to live. I mean, that's basically how we lived. So we had our different areas that we all had to live in, right?
Right.
It got abolished just at the time when I was just finished school.
Hmm.
So things started changing and that kind of stuff. But a big moving to the UK was definitely a huge eye opener for me. Firstly, I'm in a new country. I did not find, and I don't mean no disrespect, but I did not find British people very welcoming.
Right.
Yes, polite maybe, but not welcoming at all. It was really difficult to make friends or make any connection with anybody. Um, Having said that, I found the total opposite of that when I moved to the US.
Right.
I've made so many wonderful friends in all the various different states that I lived in. I have people in, people that I get really close to, and we're still close till today. We keep in South Africa. The dynamics that I grew up under, we grew up in a community, so my interactions and the people that I interacted with was mostly people of my own culture.
Hmm.
It wasn't people of different cultures. So the one thing that I really appreciated about being able to visit different countries and go around the world is it opened up my mind and it helped me to not be judgmental. It helped me to step out of that way of thinking that I know better or the way I do things is better than anybody else, because I just saw that there's 10 ways to skin a cat.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be done this way. And sometimes the other way is actually better than my way.
Hmm.
And having that open mindset has it's just put me in a whole different ballgame. It's put me in a whole different frame of mind, and the experiences that I experience and the people that I meet, it just it's wow. It's just amazing when you have that kind of type of mindset, that when you meet people, you're not coming from this closed mindset of, oh, this is the only way I know the life to be. I know that there are different shades. I know that it can be different. It doesn't have to be this.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. Is there, because as I said, we're going to close out with this advertisement from Kindu Spices. But that being said, is there a favorite food? Because I know I'm a fan of Indian cuisine, but also a fan of the Cajun cuisine as well. And this is actually a health supplement that is provided along with well, the person that provided it is actually one of the hosts of one of our other shows. So Barbara and Shawnee Smith, and it's actually her company, Shawnee Smith, can do spices and everything. But before we play that and get on out the door and everything, is there a particular type of food that you either currently enjoy or that you're hoping to try that you haven't tried as of yet?
I've always loved my Italian food because I love pasta. But my mom has always been the type of person who would mix cuisines. So she'll take things and kind of make up her own
Mm-hmm.
dish of different cuisines. And I love Indo-Chinese cuisine. I
Mm.
like the spice. So Asian, I love spice in my food. So yeah, anything that I can find and I can give it an Indian twist to by adding some spice to it, but still not losing its authentic, what it was actually meant to be. I'm up for that.
Well, you'll enjoy this particular commercial because this woman dedicated her spices to her father, and all along those lines, I'm gonna play this commercial, and then right after that, I'll hit end stream. But do stick around backstage for just a second, and I'll holler at you just for a minute or two and everything. But I think that you will enjoy this. It might even make you hungry because this is what Shawnee does with her can do spices. So let's check out this particular commercial.
Okay.
You know how people love to enjoy food and don't understand how to flavor their food or how to replicate a meal? They're interested in supplements but don't know where to begin? Well, what I do is I take the guesswork out of enjoying flavor and wellness with my flavorful spice blends so that they can create delicious meals with healing benefits. Can Do Spice was created to help cooks at any level enjoy healing through food. Every spice blend was designed to give added health benefits of natural herbs. Every blend is complete. There's no need to add any additional spice for a delicious meal. Saving you time and money while adding supplements to your meals can be both tasty and fun. My earliest memories in the kitchen began with my father, Kenny Can Do Bond, so it was fitting that I would name this line after him. I have always looked to natural remedies to supplement the body, and I found myself hiding herbs and minerals in foods for my family. That's when it hit me. Everyone needs Can Do Spice. Everyone should be having this. It's an exclusive brand for cooks at any level who want to create flavorful dishes with healing benefits that can satisfy the body and soul. Add a little spice to your life. Give Can Do Spice a try.